Hello, I'm Regina McCann-Hess, and welcome to our Women in Wealth series. Today, I have a new friend with me, and I'm so excited. Please tell us who you are, what you do, and what you love about what you do.
Sure. Hi, I'm Misty Lynch. I am the owner of Soundview Financial Advisors in Walpole, Massachusetts. I am a CFP, and I'm also a podcast host as well, and the author of the book Demystifying Money.
So many things we have in common. Oh my goodness, this is going to be such a fun conversation.
Yes.
Okay, so for us in Pennsylvania and other areas, how far out of Boston are you?
We're about 19 miles south of Boston. So I spent most of early in my career taking the train ride into Boston every day to work in the compliance department. So if you are in finance, usually you might be a little bit worried about the auditors and the compliance group, but it actually was a really great start to my career in financial services, and owning a firm was really knowing that end of the business. So, but now I work in Walpole in the town that I live in. I have two kids that go to school here, and I can walk home, which is a really nice way to balance out my life a little bit better.
Oh, that is so nice.
Hmm.
So nice. Well, good, good. Sorry. So we're both East Coasters. We're both in the financial world. Tell us a little bit more about your practice, what where your niche is, who do you like to work with, and how you're helping people.
Yeah, so I work with a lot of um, my parents are small business owners. And so I've always kind of seen the dark side of small business. Like, I think that a lot of people think entrepreneurship is very glamorous. That's the way you're either working for someone else's dream. Like, I've seen it presented in so many different ways. But when I was growing up, my parents really didn't save or invest anything. They just worked and spent and worked and worked and didn't really have any, you know, like when I worked in corporate, I had a whole HR department telling me, sign up for this account, put this much away, sign up for these benefits, all of these things that are really nice parts of having a 9 to 5 job. And so there was still part of me, that kind of wanted to be independent, have, some of the freedom that came with being a small business owner. But the financial instability, the fluctuations and stuff was really something that I'd experienced early on in life, and just kind of always figured there's a better way to do it. There has to be something else that we're missing. And so now with my firm, I tend to work with a lot of families and single women that are either business owners or have some sort of irregular income in their household, whether it's compensation that's commission based, or sales, or owning their own business where it might just not be the same thing every 2 weeks. So kind of helping them with the financial planning and building that support system so that they don't always have to work. Even if they want to work, I'd like to make it optional for them.
And isn't that the most powerful statement a person can make? I want to work versus I have to work.
Yeah, and there's a huge difference. And I talked to a lot of people, and my father was one of them. And he passed away last year, but he still owned his business and ran it. And he's like, "I'll work forever." And it's like, I bet there was a point, maybe when he was 75 or so, where he felt like maybe it would be nice not to have to, because there was
Yeah.
still the stress. It doesn't necessarily disappear or go away,
No.
especially if you're not in the habit of saving or putting your money to work. So, I love that's one thing I do love about working with some people who are entrepreneurial or small business owners. They tend to enjoy what they do, maybe a little bit more than some of my corporate clients who are really, maybe burnt out, or maybe looking to, you know, some of my, unfortunately, some of the teachers I work with, some people that are in really stressful positions that are just kind of waiting to be able to get to that point where they can leave. A lot of the business owners I have, they're not really thinking that way, but life happens. And at some point
Hmm.
you might. At some point you might want to do something different, or completely, go in another direction, or maybe sell the business, or maybe your health. All of these things that could potentially happen, kind of figuring out like, okay, well, what if we have to change? Or what if in 10 years you just don't want to do it anymore? Like, what then? And so, and kind of backing into it the way other people always have a plan to leave at some point.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure, for sure. And I mean, small business, small business owners and small businesses are the backbone of America.
Yeah.
So, I mean, helping them is like almost being patriotic, right?
In a way, I've always just like loved, I love, and this might have just been the way that I was raised. My mom didn't work when I was very little, and my father's business was really successful in the 80s, in the 80s. And he just basically told like you just create value and you get paid. You do things that people want. Like, and he was doing engineering and surveying at the time, but he always kind of like getting a job was fine, but also like you could like kind of like the opportunities out there were just endless with what you could potentially do if you realize how to solve problems for people or how to make, people's lives easier or better. He knew how to do certain things. And so I never really saw that, you go in, you ask for a day off, you get paid, that just wasn't normal for us. Normal for us was like dad was around and working. But it was always his business. And then when business slowed down, there was no unemployment. There was no help.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that part of it was, I'm glad that I kind of saw both sides of it, the plus, like when things were really good, but unfortunately they spent the money on sports cars and boats in the 80s, big hair, beautiful outfits. And they probably would have been influencers if that was a thing at the time. And then it was really different. We had to move, we had to sell everything. Um, and I just think back to that, like, wow, if in the 80s they just put a piece of that away, life would have been
Yeah.
completely different.
Oh
We could have
gosh,
gotten through
yeah.
the bad times so much smoother. And so that's something that I want to kind of, especially for the people who are now coming into money, or they suddenly have more money than they expected, like stock options. They just didn't even, their brain wasn't ready for this, to kind of figure out how do you adjust instead of just defaulting to what which could probably be being broke, spending, or
Hmm.
not
Yeah.
having
Yeah.
extra. So just to kind of prevent them from what is very natural for us to do.
Right, right. And not many of us had any kind of financial 101 adulting
No.
in high school or college unless you had a finance degree. Most of us are just trying to figure it out, you know,
Yeah.
as we go.
Yeah, and the more I talk to people, I used to think everybody was better off than me when I was like like growing up in high school and college. I thought like everybody seemed like they had more, but now I think about it, the more people I talk to, like most people felt like their family got by or did fine. Maybe they just didn't know how things were. They never talked about it. And so
Mhm.
I feel like there's very few people that, maybe their parents told them to save in like a scarcity way. And so they have all this money saved and they're afraid to part with it. But nobody has a really well balanced, healthy mindset when it comes to money, at least that I've come across. So it's more often than not, we take bits and pieces of things that we've seen and we do the best we can with it. And so that's why, when I wrote the book and when I talk to people about money, really, it's just kind of like questioning those beliefs that we have and figuring out, why do we think that? Why do we think we have to hold on to everything and it's going to be, we can't spend, or why do we think someone's going to take it away if we don't spend it? So we might as well, like, where do these thoughts come from? And then maybe try to create something that might serve you a little bit better when those
Yeah.
thoughts start to creep in.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell us a little bit more about the book.
Yeah, so I wrote the book Demystifying Money during 2020. I kind of did a lot of different things, but COVID kind of it was actually a pretty interesting time to be a financial planner because people were in very unique positions. Some people had more money than ever. They
Yeah.
weren't doing anything. They weren't spending. Maybe they were able to cut down on commuting costs and all these other costs. And they were really starting to reevaluate maybe what they were doing. Other people lost their jobs. And then that fueled them into creating a small business or turning something that they had been doing or always wanted to do into, now their new business. And so I was really busy in 2020, but I was hearing the same things over and over again. Like, I have all this money and I feel bad about it. Or I know everybody else is struggling. And like this crisis, like this, thought pattern of being like, I shouldn't be happy. I like so like it was just interesting. And so I felt like there's a lot of people who maybe were forced to be in this like reflective kind of period. And so I ended up doing a certification as a life coach because I wanted to help my financial clients better. But these questions weren't money questions. It wasn't how much money do I need to retire? It wasn't returns. It was like, why am I not happy? I
Mm,
have all of these things. I have this stuff. And so I wanted to kind of like look at other things that happen when it comes to money that are not necessarily math, like setting boundaries with people or thinking like creating goals, because a lot of people just didn't have any, like you'd ask what they wanted to do and they'd say buy a house, maybe pay off debt, maybe retire at 65. Like that was the answer sheet.
hmm
Not
Yeah.
like why 65? Why do you want to own? Where do you want to own a home? What's it going to look like? No thought into that. Just kind of like, isn't that what I'm supposed to want?
Yeah.
And some people couldn't even get past, they were in so much debt or student loan, they couldn't get past even like what they would do once they were debt free. A lot of times that meant they would just go back into debt because that
Mm,
felt really normal. So really trying to figure out like, what do you like? What do you really want? What have you always believed? What might be holding you back? So I kind of wrote this book with a couple like journal prompts at the end of the chapters just to really, I went through this work myself because I mean, for a long time, I didn't really like rich people because I grew up with like struggling all the time from the time I was like 10 until adulthood. And so I was like, how am I going to help people build wealth if part of me feels like anger or jealous of people who
yeah.
are doing better, who I all thought were doing better than me, when most of us were just trying to get by, trying to figure it out.
Exactly.
So really kind of
Exactly.
combining some of the mindset work that I'd done on myself to like give to people to who maybe are coming to me thinking, I think I need a financial plan, but they really don't know what they want. And so it's really hard to kind of reach for a goal if it's too abstract, or if they really don't want to buy a house, there's always going to be something that
Yeah.
comes up and pops up. And then it's like, well, is this something you actually really want? Or were you always told you should want it?
So true. So true. And it's just like, well, this is what I should be doing because I'm X age. This is
I'm,
the next
I'm
step, as
30.
opposed, yeah,
I want a
right.
kid. Maybe I don't. Like, okay,
They're
you know,
expensive, those little critters.
very expensive, very serious, but it's almost like, and there's a lot of people like once they actually start to unravel what they want. I've had, one client was like, I'd love to have enough property to adopt senior dogs and just let them live out their best life. And I was like, I love that. Let's
That's
do
so cool.
that. Because it's
Yeah,
like that isn't a template answer. That is not something that people think, that is you. And
for
like
sure.
those kind of goals, I think are the ones that they'll make sacrifices for.
Yeah,
Because they're
yeah,
real, they're not just like, oh, I'm curious about that, but I'm not really that committed to it.
for sure. For sure. Now, if any of the listeners want to find out more about you, your practice, your book, where should they go?
Sure. So if you're interested to learn more about me, it's pretty simple. I have mistylynch.com is kind of the home base where I have, a link to the business, but also episodes of the podcast where I talk to different entrepreneurs kind of about how they got to where that. I talked to Regina, I talked to authors, just people, about business, because there's so many ways people can make a living. And I think it's just interesting to hear those stories, especially if you're kind of, if you're on the fence about what you want to do next. So if you go to mistylynch.com, you could follow, the books there, the podcast there, and then just some other, other old blog articles, things like that. Anything in the realm of thoughts and feelings about money.
Cool, cool. Are you on any of the social medias?
Yep. So Misty Lynch CFP on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. I think I'm just Misty Lynch, but I'm also pretty active there. And then on I've started to do a little bit of TikTok with demystifying money. So that's at demystifying money. I don't spend a lot of time there, but
I'm proud of
just
you. I'm
yeah,
proud of you.
it's an
I'm
interesting
I'm
space.
I'm still like, oh no, no, I think I'm gonna skip that
I
one for now.
yeah, we'll see. And then the podcast is on YouTube as well. So that's one of the areas that I know is where people are starting to look for information. So I feel like that's there. But I'm most active probably on Facebook and Instagram at Misty Lynch
Perfect.
CFP.
Perfect, perfect. Excellent, excellent. So, knowing that we're both in the financial industry, this is the next question's a little loaded. Um, what have been some challenges as a professional woman that you've encountered?
Yeah. And I feel like I encountered more of them in corporate, really. I was working for a firm and a big firm, and I was an examiner, and I was traveling to a lot of different offices all over the country. And when I was in my earlier 20s, that was, it was great. But then when I got to, when I got a little, people would be like, oh, well, you know, how can you travel so much? These were questions that I couldn't imagine my husband ever getting.
No.
Who's taking care of your kids when you're
Oh,
here? And it was different. It was very different in different parts of the countries. Like California, I did not get certain parts I didn't. Other parts of the country, it was just very much like your husband lets you do this job, and I was like, yeah, I pay. I pay a pretty big percent of our lifestyle with this job, and so it started to get very frustrating to hear that. And so, um, and even being in financial services period, it was just I kind of went the corporate route for a while because when I first became a registered representative past the Series 7, um, and I worked at a smaller place, people just always wanted to talk to the guy in charge. I basically just looked right past me. So I said, this is going to work out. And I went to corporate for 12 years.
yeah.
Now I feel like it's such a different environment. I feel like there's still a lower amount of like women and CFPs, but I feel like as far as having like the ability, like running my firm, living and working in the same town, I feel like it's given me a lot more I don't know, capacity as a mom, as a working mom to kind of like set my hours, like plan my schedule in my day. Um, More so than I always felt like I was trying to like pretend I didn't have kids when I was in corporate. I tried to like be able to go to all the happy hours, be able to go be very visible and present because I thought if I didn't, I'd get overlooked or people would be like,
Hmm.
no, she's got a family, she's fine, like not considered. And so
Yeah.
I probably ended up spending more time at work than I really wanted to,
Yeah.
just because I was always concerned about the optics. And I turned 40 and bought the firm, left corporate, starting doing the stuff that was really authentic to me, and things took off.
Good
But
for
for a
you.
long time,
Good.
I was trying to be like one of the guys. And
Yeah. No,
I learned golf.
completely
I
understand
could,
that.
yeah. And so I think that was probably the biggest challenge was really just being, you know, trying to fit into some narrative that really wasn't me.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And I have four older brothers, so that part was a little easier for me. But I do think it's hysterical that people will ask women when they're out working or they travel for their work, well, who's watching your children? When I know plenty of men who travel for a living and they're never asked that question.
Yeah, and I almost felt like people felt like you shouldn't be here when I'd get that question. Like you should be
Yeah,
there, like our wives are home. Like it was
yeah.
always a little it was awkward. And my husband and I like our relationship was fine with that. My husband is fantastic with the kids. Like he should be the person that the school calls first. Like he's,
Mhm.
it was just, and it was hard for people to, you know, he was working from home since before COVID and they would still call me in Boston at the
Oh,
school. And I'd be
jeez.
like, he is right there. So it was just kind of, we've always had that dynamic. And
Mhm.
luckily, like his sisters are very successful. His mom worked, like it was never a thing for us
Yeah. Oh,
personally,
yeah.
but for
Yeah.
other
It's
people, we had
other
a real
people.
problem with it.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And sadly, I have a client who literally about 2 months ago interviewed for a job, a better job within the same company, and was asked in the interview, which is illegal, what her childcare plans were if she got that job. And I was just like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
unfortunate because it's just and I think that it's just hard for like even for me to like tell my husband like because he's just never experienced that.
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
no one
That,
would ever say it. And so I
no,
think that, I've noticed now in this career, a lot of people like talking to women, men and women are
yeah,
like they're able to open up. I'm not intimidating and I'm not trying to be. But
right,
I feel
right,
like
right.
that has been kind of helpful because um, you know, I just feel like there's so many people out there that have questions and need help, and the industry has been kind of um, you know, intentionally intimidating
Yeah.
to
Oh, yeah.
people.
Yeah. Well,
And
when
so
you
I think
create
a
your
lot of
own
us contribute.
language, when
Yeah.
you create your own language that nobody can understand with jargon, then there you go.
Yeah, exactly. So
That can be a problem.
yeah. So now I'm like, how can I use who I am to actually benefit me instead of trying to kind of dull it down?
Yeah. Perfect. 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 All right. One last question for you is tell us about your vision of retirement.
Okay. Yeah. So I hope at some point I'm in New England and I have a small place in Vermont near Mount Snow that we bought a couple of years back as like a rental property. So I imagine in retirement, like I see sometimes when I go to Mount Snow, like the people that are kind of like scanning the passes, hanging out, like, how's it going? Like they seem really happy. And like, so I'm like, yeah, maybe in retirement, maybe I'll ski as long as humanly possible for me to. And maybe I'll just have, a job where I'm hanging out outside. I feel like I can never picture myself like not actually working at all, but I'm like, that would be lovely. I think
Yeah.
just something that's a little something to do, somewhere to go. And yeah, maybe somewhere near the mountains, nice and quiet, peaceful, close
Love
enough
it.
to a city, but nice and like easy enough to kind of feel like you're escaping for a little while. I think that
Absolutely.
sounds like my plan.
That sounds fun. I know, and it's great though, because, 10, 15 years ago, the retirement vision, what I picture in my head was the granny on the rocker chair on the porch.
Hmm.
When I ask that question, I get so many different answers for that,
Yeah.
and it's all fabulous. Like everyone, is saying, well, I'm going to work, but I'm going to do this, and I might volunteer, and I'm going to do that. And it's just such a fun way to think about what somebody wants to do, what their next chapter is going to be,
Yeah.
and then if you're helping them or I'm helping them, it's help it's fun for us because we're letting them get to the point where they can realize their vision. So it's
Yeah,
pretty
no.
cool.
I'm like, if I can be physically active, like that is something I want to hold on to for as long as possible because I've seen people that is one thing you can't buy back. So it's like something where I feel like I could be outdoors and like when I see people like that in retirement and they're like having a blast and they're I'm like, that's the goal right there. That's what I want to do.
So true, so true. And I don't know if you've experienced this, but my retirees, they are busier, harder to get a hold of than my worker bees. And my worker bees are working hard, but when people retire, they're like, well, all the things that they wanted to do all that time, now they're doing them. So it's
Yeah,
kind of
no, I
cool.
feel like the whole like take your expenses and then it's going to be 60%. It's kind of out the window lately. I feel like no, you might be busy. Yeah. My clients they'll be taking the cruises that they're doing the things and like I love to see it.
It's awesome. Fabulous, fabulous. Well, I want to thank you so much for being here today. I was very excited to have you here,
Oh, thank you so
and
much for
learn.
having me. It was great to
Yeah,
talk with you
awesome.
again.
Very cool. You have a great mindset. I love what you're doing out there. So we'll definitely keep in touch.
Thank you.
And thanks everyone else for joining us. Again, I'm Regina McCann Hess, president of Forge Wealth, and my website is forgewealth.com. I am on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Forge Wealth, LinkedIn, Regina McCann Hess. And I would say our call to action today is to think about, your retirement vision. How active do you see yourself with the changing times, for sure. All right. Thank you. Have a great day.